The old archive room was pitch black. Maggie Sterling sat on concrete that hadn't been swept since the Cold War, her salt and pepper hair clinging to cheeks wet with silent tears. The feeble glow from her dying phone, 3% battery, maybe 10 minutes left, barely illuminated the tarnished brass plaque mounted on the far wall. Sterling Security Systems, pioneer of American innovation, 1982. Her father's company, her life's work. All of it about to be erased by a 15-minute board vote on Monday afternoon. The pill bottle felt heavy in her palm. 90 Ambien tablets prescribed 3 months ago when the first whispers of Ventura Corp's interest had reached her ears. Just a precaution, she'd told herself then. An exit strategy for the worst-case scenario she never truly believed would arrive. That was before this morning's meeting. Before she'd watched Marcus Brennan, her CFO, her closest friend for 40 years present, financial projections that painted her leadership as obsolete. Before Margaret Chen had unveiled a modernization strategy that would effectively gut Sterling's unique approach to security architecture. Before she'd realized the vote was mere formality, the decision already made in golf courses and private dining rooms where her invitations had mysteriously stopped arriving 6 months ago. Maggie poured 10 pills into her trembling hand. The phone screen dimmed to conserve battery. In the sudden darkness, she could almost hear her father's voice from that last hospital visit. His heart-failing words, barely whispers. Always another chapter, Maggie. Never let them erase what we built. She'd failed him. The chapter was ending. The erasure was scheduled for 2 p.m. Monday. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, measured, deliberate, approaching. A man's tread, unfamiliar rhythm. Maggie's breath caught. Nobody knew she was here. The executive floor had emptied hours ago. The footsteps stopped outside the steel door, a knock firm but not aggressive. "Hello, anyone in there?" Deep voice, slight roughness of age. Not threatening, almost gentle. Maggie's throat closed. She tried to call out, but no sound came. The pills scattered from her hand, clattering across concrete in the darkness. "Ma'am?" The voice carried concern now. "I heard something. Are you okay?" She found her voice raw and broken. "Help, I'm trapped. This door needs a code." "Do you know it?" 070482. July 4th, 1982. The day her father had founded Sterling Security in their garage, mortgaging the house, betting everything on a vision that computers would need protection as much as physical assets. Beeps from the keypad. The lock mechanism clicked. The door swung inward, fluorescent light from the corridor flooding the archive room like a searchlight exposing her shame. But Maggie wasn't there. The man's silhouette filled the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing what looked like a maintenance uniform. He swept a heavy-duty flashlight across the empty space, landing on the oak table her father had used as a drafting desk on the filing cabinets with fading labels on the glass cases containing Sterling's earliest hardware. "Ma'am, where are you?" "In here." Her voice came from deeper inside. "There's another room. I pressed something on the wall and it opened, but now I can't get out." The beam tracked along the back wall, finding the seam she'd discovered hours ago. The man moved methodically, running his free hand along the concrete, searching for the release mechanism. His work gloves were stained, but his movements were precise, patient. Not the frantic urgency of someone making minimum wage on night shift, but the careful attention of someone who understood how things worked. He found the pressure plate. The hidden door swung outward, revealing Maggie sitting on the floor of her father's secret workspace, mascara-streaked designer suit covered in decades of dust, looking nothing like the CEO whose face had graced Fortune's cover 3 times. The flashlight beam caught her face, then immediately lowered, a small gesture of respect that somehow made her want to weep again. "Ms. Sterling." Recognition, surprise, but no judgment. He removed his work gloves and extended a calloused hand. "Dave Chen, building maintenance night shift." Maggie took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. His grip was firm, steadying. The kind of handshake that had built things, fixed things, held things together when they threatened to fall apart. "I wasn't expecting to find the CEO in a hidden room on a Friday night. Not many people know about this room. It's not on any building plans." "I can see that." His eyes moved past her, taking in the ancient IBM computer covered in dust cloths, the metal desk, the shelves of documentation that predated digital archives. Curiosity evident in his gaze, but he made no move to explore uninvited. Instead, he glanced at the table in the outer room where her phone sat beside the open pill bottle illuminated in his flashlight beam. A moment of uncomfortable recognition passed between them. He understood immediately what the pills were for, what she'd been planning, but he simply reached for her phone and handed it to her. "Battery's almost dead. I've got a charger in my office upstairs if you need it." Maggie took the phone, slipping it into her pocket. Then, avoiding his gaze, quickly retrieved the pill bottle. The tablets she'd scattered remained on the concrete floor like breadcrumbs, leading back to a decision she could no longer unmake, even if she'd wanted to. "Thank you, Mr. Chen. I appreciate your thoroughness. I should be going." He didn't move from the doorway, not blocking her exit but not stepping aside either. When he spoke, his voice carried genuine concern rather than professional obligation. "Ma'am, forgive me for asking, but are you all right?" The unexpected kindness nearly shattered what remained of her composure. Maggie's carefully reconstructed CEO mask wavered. She looked at this stranger, this maintenance worker who'd somehow found her in a locked room that didn't officially exist, who'd seen her at her absolute lowest, and responded with dignity rather than pity, and felt something crack open inside her chest. "I'm fine. Just got accidentally locked in while retrieving some old documents." He nodded slowly, clearly not believing her, but respectful enough not to challenge the obvious lie. "It's past 10, Ms. Sterling. Building's empty except for security up front. Can I walk you out?" Maggie hesitated, then nodded. The thought of navigating the dark corridors alone suddenly seemed unbearable. They moved in silence through the dim basement. The maintenance elevator was stuck at this level, its doors gaping like an open mouth, revealing the shaft beyond. Dave shone his flashlight into the darkness. "This thing's been acting up for months. I keep telling them it needs a complete overhaul, not just patches. Facilities management. New company took over the contract last year, cut corners everywhere they can." Quiet disdain colored his words. "We'll take the service stairs, more reliable." He led her to an unmarked door that opened onto a concrete stairwell. As they began to climb, Maggie noticed he favored his right leg slightly, a subtle hitch in his gait that spoke of old injury rather than current pain. "You're limping." "Old injury. Acts up when the weather's changing." He didn't elaborate, and Maggie didn't press. They emerged on the ground floor into the polished marble lobby that stood in stark contrast to the utilitarian basement. The night security guard looked up from his desk, surprise registering on his face at the sight of the CEO emerging from the service entrance with the maintenance man. "Evening, Ms. Sterling. Everything okay?" "Yes, John. Mr. Chen was just helping me retrieve some archived materials." She turned to Dave. "Thank you again." He nodded, expression unreadable in the lobby's dim lighting. "Ma'am?" Something made her call after him as he turned to leave Mr. Chen. He paused, looking back. "How long have you worked here at Sterling?" A slight smile creased his weathered face. "Coming up on 15 years now." 15 years? She let the number settle. "And we've never met." "No reason we would have, ma'am. I work nights mostly. Keep the place running while everyone else goes home." No bitterness in his voice, just simple fact. But the words landed with unexpected weight. For 15 years, this man had maintained the infrastructure that allowed her to do her job, and she'd never once noticed him. Never once thought about the invisible workforce that kept Sterling Security functioning. An irrational desire seized her to delay returning to the empty penthouse apartment where the weight of today's betrayal waited to crush her again, to continue talking to this stranger who'd seen her broken and responded with unexpected grace. "Do you have time for coffee, Mr. Chen? There's a diner around the corner that should still be open. I'd like to hear more about the building maintenance issues. As CEO, I should be aware of these things." Surprise flickered across his face, followed by cautious assessment. His eyes glanced briefly toward her purse where the pill bottle now rested. "There's a place called Rosie's All Night, still open. Better coffee than the break room stuff. 20 minutes later, they sat in a vinyl booth that had probably been installed during the Reagan administration. The diner was a throwback establishment that had somehow survived gentrification, linoleum floors, fluorescent lights, laminated menus, offering breakfast at any hour. A waitress in her 60s with a name tag reading Dottie greeted Dave by name and brought him coffee and apple pie without asking. "Come here often." Maggie warmed her hands around a ceramic mug of surprisingly good coffee. "Few nights a week on my dinner break." Dave nodded toward the waitress. "Dottie's husband was in my unit during Desert Storm. Good man." "You served in the Gulf War?" "Army, 82nd Airborne. Long time ago now." Maggie studied him with new interest, seeing details she'd missed in the basement's dim light. The military short haircut going silver at the temples, the faded tattoo on his forearm beneath his rolled-up sleeve unit, insignia of some kind, the straight posture despite the limp, the calm, assessing way he evaluated his surroundings like someone trained to notice threats. "And after the service, what did you do before Sterling?" A shadow passed over his face. He took a careful sip of coffee before answering. "Worked in tech, actually. Software engineer. Then some smaller firms. Was at Microplex Systems until 2008. Microplex. The name triggered recognition. They went under during the financial crisis. Along with my pension and 30 years of specialized expertise." No self-pity in his tone, just matter-of-fact recitation. "But you didn't ask me to coffee to hear an old man's career complaints, Ms. Sterling." "Maggie, please." "Maggie." He said her name carefully, testing it. "Dave." She nodded, then looked out the window at the dark street, at the occasional passing car, at the Boston she'd conquered and was about to lose. "The board is selling Sterling Security to Ventura Corp. The vote is Monday, but it's already decided." Dave's expression remained neutral, but something shifted in his eyes, understanding, perhaps sympathy. "Been rumors about that for months in the maintenance department. Sorry to hear it's happening." 40 years. Her voice went hollow. "My father founded Sterling in our garage. Classic American success story. MIT engineer decides he can build better systems than anyone else. Mortgages the house, works 18-hour days. I was 15 when he started the company. Did my homework on one end of the workbench while he soldered circuit boards on the other." Dave nodded, recognition in his expression. "Different time, when things were still made here. We never took the company public. That was deliberate." Bitterness crept into her voice now. "My father believed that answering to shareholders would force the kind of short-term thinking that kills innovation. So instead, we have a board full of family, friends, and industry experts who just voted to sell everything to a conglomerate that will strip mine our technology and discard the shell." Technology changes. Dave cut a piece of pie with his fork. "Companies come and go. Been happening since the Industrial Revolution." The words should have been dismissive, but his tone wasn't. More like someone stating uncomfortable truth without trying to soften it. "Is that supposed to be comforting?" "Just history, though some parts of history shouldn't be forgotten so quickly." Something in the way he said it made Maggie pause, sensing layers beneath the simple statement. "You said you worked at Microplex. Doing what?" "Systems programming, low-level stuff mostly. And before that," he hesitated, then IBM. "Worked on subsystems for operating systems in the 80s. Maggie's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't interrupt. Dave continued, "The industry changed, got younger faster, then came outsourcing, downsizing. 2008 finished what was left of my career path." A shrug. "I've got a daughter to support. Maintenance work is steady, no shame in it." "No, of course not. I didn't mean to imply. No offense taken." He finished his coffee. "But since we're asking personal questions, mind if I ask one?" Maggie tensed, then nodded. "That room downstairs. The hidden one. What's in there that's worth—" He paused, choosing words carefully. "Worth coming back to. After hours." She studied his face, searching for judgment or pity, finding only genuine curiosity. "History. My father's legacy. The real story of Sterling Security, not the sanitized version that will appear in Ventura Corp's press release next week." And what will you do now, after the sale? The question hung in the air between them. Maggie's hand moved unconsciously toward her purse, toward the pill bottle. Dave's eyes followed the gesture, then returned to her face, steady and patient. There's always another chapter, Maggie. Always. Easy to say. Didn't say it was easy. Said it was true. He placed his fork down deliberately. My wife died in 2016. Cancer. Left me with an 8-year-old daughter and a mountain of medical debt on top of a foreclosure notice. Thought about ending things myself. The simple admission, delivered without drama or self-pity, caught Maggie completely off guard. What stopped you? Lily, my daughter. A smile softened his weathered face. Couldn't leave her alone in this world. So I found another way, always another way. Maggie looked away, uncomfortable with the transparent understanding between them. This stranger had seen through her in a way that friends of 40 years had not. Or perhaps they'd seen but chosen to ignore, finding it easier to accept her carefully maintained facade than confront the truth of her despair. I should go. She reached for her purse, but Dave had already signaled for the check. I'll walk you to your car. That's not necessary. Humor an old soldier's habits, ma'am. My mother raised me to see ladies safely to their transportation. Outside, the April night was unseasonably cool, a brisk wind channeling between downtown buildings. Maggie's Tesla waited in its reserved spot behind the building, gleaming black under security lights. Nice car. It's just a car. She unlocked it with her phone. Thank you for the coffee, Dave, and for finding me earlier. He nodded, expression serious. You going to be okay tonight? The directness of it, are you going to use those pills, made her breath catch. I'll be fine. If you don't mind some unsolicited advice, sleep on any big decisions. World looks different in morning light, always has. Maggie nodded, then impulsively reached into her purse and extracted a business card, offering it to him. If you ever need anything, Dave, a reference or help with your daughter's education, anything. He took the card, studying it for a moment before tucking it into his shirt pocket. Appreciate that, though I suspect you might have bigger concerns come Monday. Yes. She opened the car door. Well, good night, Mr. Chen. Ma'am. He stepped back, watching as she slid into the driver's seat. Just before she closed the door, he spoke again. That hidden room. I'm guessing not many people know about it. No, just me as far as I know. My father built it secretly during renovations in the 90s. Dave nodded thoughtfully. Might be worth another look before the new owners take over. Old secrets have a way of becoming valuable when the landscape changes. With that cryptic comment, he gave a respectful nod and turned, walking back toward the service entrance of Sterling Security. His limp was barely noticeable in his measured stride, the gait of someone who'd learned to work around pain rather than surrender to it. Maggie watched him disappear into the building before starting her car. The digital dashboard, illuminated with Sterling's proprietary interface, one of the company's smaller innovations licensed to luxury automakers, soon to be rebranded as Ventura Corp Technology, no doubt. As she drove through nearly empty downtown streets toward her Beacon Hill apartment, Maggie found herself thinking not about Marcus's betrayal or Monday's looming finality, but about Dave Chen, a man who'd helped build the foundations of modern computing, now walking the midnight corridors of someone else's technological empire, a man who'd faced his own abyss and chosen to step back from the edge. For the first time since the board meeting, she felt something other than despair, not hope exactly, but curiosity. What had her father hidden in that inner chamber? What secrets might still lie dormant in Sterling's forgotten archives? She'd intended this weekend to be her last. Time to put affairs in order to craft the perfect resignation letter, to empty the pill bottle and exit with the dignity the board had tried to deny her. Now she found herself considering a different possibility. Dave's words echoed in her mind, always another chapter. By the time she reached her apartment, the pill bottle no longer seemed like the only option. There was something else to do first, a mystery to solve, a legacy to uncover. Monday's corporate execution might still be inevitable, but Maggie Sterling was no longer ready to go quietly into oblivion. Not until she'd examined every possibility, uncovered every secret, explored every hidden room in the house her father had built. The sleek, minimalist apartment chosen by an interior designer to project success and sophistication suddenly seemed sterile and impersonal as she stepped inside. Had she ever really lived here or merely existed between board meetings and international flights? Maggie moved to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Boston Harbor. City lights reflected on dark water, a constellation of human ambition and perseverance. Somewhere out there, Dave Chen was returning to whatever modest home housed himself and his daughter. A man who'd helped build the modern world now invisible to it. How many others like him were there? Pioneers erased from official narratives, their contributions forgotten while figureheads claimed glory. How much of Sterling's success had been built on unacknowledged brilliance? She carried the pill bottle to the bathroom and emptied its contents into the toilet. The soft whirlpool carried away what had seemed just hours ago like her only escape. "Always another chapter," she whispered to her reflection. The face that stared back was tired, the carefully maintained facade of corporate confidence stripped away to reveal vulnerability beneath. But in her eyes, familiar determination began to rekindle the same look her father had worn when facing seemingly insurmountable technical challenges. Maggie had 3 days before Ventura Corp took ownership of her life's work. 3 days to discover what her father had hidden in that secret room. 3 days to find a way to preserve what mattered most. She set an alarm for 5 a.m. and forced herself to sleep. Saturday morning arrived with soft spring sunshine filtering through bedroom windows. For a moment, in the gentle haze between sleep and wakefulness, Maggie forgot the corporate execution awaiting her on Monday. Then reality crashed back with the weight of a physical force pressing against her chest. But something was different this morning. The despair that had driven her to the basement archives with a bottle of pills had transformed overnight into smoldering determination. By 7:30 she'd showered, dressed in casual clothes that would have shocked her executive team: jeans, simple blouse, comfortable shoes, and was pulling into the parking garage beneath Sterling's security. Weekend security was minimal. The young guard at the desk barely glanced at her ID badge before waving her through. The building felt different on Saturday. Hollow, expectant, like a theater between performances. Her footsteps echoed in the marble lobby as she bypassed the executive elevator and headed for the service stairs Dave had shown her the night before. At the archive room door, she entered the code 070482 and felt a surge of relief when the lock disengaged. The room was exactly as she'd left it. The hidden door to the inner chamber stood partially open, revealing darkness beyond. This time Maggie came prepared. She'd brought a powerful lantern and a portable charger. She illuminated the inner chamber, revealing what she'd only glimpsed the night before. Her father's secret workspace, preserved like a time capsule from the mid-90s. The IBM computer was actually more advanced than she'd initially thought, a prototype system that had never been mass-produced. Beside it sat stacks of notebooks filled with Robert Sterling's distinctive handwriting, technical diagrams, pages of complex mathematics. She began systematic exploration, carefully examining each notebook, each folder. Hours passed as she lost herself in her father's private thoughts and innovations. But nothing explained why he'd maintained the secret room. Nothing that could be considered the crown jewels he'd hinted at before his death. Until she opened the bottom drawer of the metal desk. Inside was a single red folder marked with a simple symbol, an eagle silhouette. The Sterling security logo. Maggie's heart quickened as she lifted it out. Inside was not technical documentation, but a series of letters exchanged between her father and someone identified only as D.C., March 1987. Dave, your refinement to the core sequencing is brilliant. The cascading verification method you suggested will make Sentinel impenetrable for decades, but we must keep this collaboration private. Microplex's non-compete clause could destroy both our careers. Robert. Maggie stared at the initials. D.C., Dave Chen. She read through dozens of letters, piecing together the story. From 1985 to 1995, Dave had collaborated with her father on Project Sentinel, Sterling's breakthrough encryption system. They'd worked in this very room, Dave coding, while employed elsewhere, moonlighting in violation of non-compete agreements. Robert Sterling had paid Dave in cash, $50,000 a year under the table. No contracts, no recognition, no patents. The final letter was dated March 15, 1997, 2 weeks before her father's fatal heart attack. Dave Guardian project is nearly complete. The crown jewel. Supply chain security using Sentinel principles applied to physical objects. Revolutionary. But I'm not well. Heart condition worsening. If something happens to me, Margaret will need you to finish this. She doesn't know about our collaboration yet. The time will come when she needs to know. Keep the faith. Robert. Maggie sat on the concrete floor, the red folder clutched to her chest. Her father had a secret collaborator, a genius partner whose name appeared nowhere in company history, someone who'd helped build the technology that made Sterling Security successful, and that someone was now working as a maintenance man in the building his innovations had helped create. A noise from the outer archive room made her freeze. Footsteps, then a familiar voice. "Ms. Sterling, you in here?" She emerged from the hidden chamber to find Dave standing in the doorway, still dressed in his maintenance uniform despite it being Saturday. "Security called, said you'd come in early. Thought I'd check if you needed anything." His eyes moved to the red folder in her hand. No surprise, almost as if he'd expected this. D.C. Maggie held up the folder. "That's you, isn't it, Dave Chen? You worked with my father on Project Sentinel." Dave was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Been a long time since I've seen that folder." "You knew about this room all along. You've been here before. Your father and I worked together occasionally, off the books. This was our workspace." "Why didn't you tell me last night?" "Would you have believed a maintenance man claiming to be your father's secret collaborator?" He shrugged. "Besides, those days are long gone. Ancient history." Maggie opened the folder, extracting a page of handwritten calculations. "This encryption algorithm, you helped design portions of it. Your father was the visionary. I just helped with mathematical refinement and implementation. But your name never appeared on any patents, any documentation. That was the arrangement. I was bound by non-compete clauses. Your father paid me privately. We both knew my career wouldn't survive if Microplex found out." Maggie studied him with new eyes. Not just a maintenance worker who'd once been a programmer, but a genuine pioneer who'd helped create Sterling's most successful platform. "Dave, this algorithm is still in use today. Modified, updated, but the core principles remain. Your work has been protecting data for decades." A hint of pride broke through his careful composure. "Good to know it stood the test of time. And now Ventura Corp is going to buy it, rebrand it, probably dismantle it." Her voice hardened. "They'll erase every trace of where it came from, who built it." "That's business." Though his eyes reflected her anger. "No, that's not progress. That's corporate consolidation masquerading as innovation." She paced the archive room, mind racing. "There has to be more. My father talked about crown jewels, something revolutionary. Guardian. It's mentioned in this last letter." She turned to face Dave directly. "Do you know what that is?" Something shifted in his expression, the maintenance worker facade falling away. "May I?" Maggie nodded. Dave moved to the hidden chamber with purposeful stride. He went directly to the framed photograph on the wall, the Sterling founding team photo, and removed it. Then he pried open the frame backing, revealing a small USB drive taped to the inside. "Your father was paranoid about corporate espionage, physical separation from network systems." He offered her the drive. Maggie took it, turning the small device over in her palm. "Will this even work with modern systems?" "It's just storage. Interface is outdated, but data should be intact." Dave glanced at his watch. "My shift technically started 20 minutes ago. Should make some rounds." Maggie nodded, slipping the drive into her pocket. "Dave, I need to understand what's on this. If it's what my father considered his greatest work, it might be nothing, just theoretical concepts, incomplete algorithms. Or it might be exactly what I need to fight Ventura Corp's takeover." They looked at each other, decades of invisible history suddenly visible between them. "Would you help me? You understood my father's work better than anyone." Dave's weathered face revealed internal conflict. "Ms. Sterling." "Maggie, please." "Maggie, I'm a maintenance worker now. Have been for 15 years. That other life, it doesn't exist anymore. I don't believe that. I can see him right now looking at my father's old computer like a musician reuniting with a beloved instrument. Dave said nothing, but his expression softened. I know it's a lot to ask, but I have less than 48 hours before Ventura Corp erases 40 years of innovation, before they erase my father's legacy. She paused. Before they erase your contributions too. Even if I wanted to help, I have responsibilities. My daughter. Bring her. The words came out impulsively. There's room in my apartment. She can do whatever kids do. We'll figure it out. A small smile tugged at Dave's lips. Lily's not exactly your typical 8-year-old. She doesn't do much of what other kids do. He paused, considering. But she has been asking about the Boston Science Museum. It's just a few blocks from here. Perfect. You take her to the museum this morning. Afterward, you both come to my place. We'll order lunch and see what Guardian is all about. Hope surged for the first time since the board meeting. Please, Dave, I can't do this alone. He stood silent, past and present wrestling within him. Finally, he reached into his pocket and produced the business card she'd given him. He turned it over, wrote a phone number on the back, and handed it to her. My cell. Text me your address. We'll come by around 1. Thank you. Just to be clear, I'm not promising anything. I'll look at what's on that drive, that's all. That's all I'm asking. After he left, Maggie remained in the archive room for another hour, gathering documents that chronicled Sterling's true history. If Monday's execution couldn't be avoided, at least she would preserve the authentic record. As she finally prepared to leave, her phone chimed. Marcus Brennan's name appeared. Maggie, we need to talk. Brunch at the Charles, 11:30. Important developments. She stared at the message. Marcus, her supposed friend who'd orchestrated this betrayal. She typed back, sorry, busy today. Monday is soon enough. Then, gathering her materials, she locked the archive room and headed for her car. The USB drive felt heavy in her pocket, full of potential and possibility. Sunday morning, 3:47 a.m. The R&D lab hummed with the white noise of servers processing code that hadn't existed 72 hours ago. Dave's fingers moved across the keyboard with a velocity that startled even him, 15 years away from serious programming. Yet the syntax flowed like a language he'd never truly forgotten. Muscle memory reached deeper than conscious thought. Maggie coordinated API integrations at the adjacent workstation, her business acumen translating Guardian's theoretical framework into practical deployment scenarios. She understood market positioning, regulatory compliance, customer pain points. Dave understood algorithms, data structures, cryptographic primitives. Together they were bridging a gap that neither could cross alone. Lily hunched over her whiteboard stylus, dancing across the surface as she sketched mathematical proofs that would have challenged graduate students. The child worked with an intensity that seemed almost preternatural. No fidgeting, no complaints, just pure absorption and pattern recognition that her 8-year-old brain processed faster than most adults could follow. Dad, she didn't look up from her screen. Line 2847 has an infinite loop. You need a break condition. Dave scrolled to the line, examined the logic, felt a smile tug at his mouth. Good catch, kiddo. He fixed it in 30 seconds. Lily had already moved on to the next problem. Maggie watched their interaction, this wordless communication between father and daughter, like jazz musicians who'd played together so long they anticipated each other's rhythms. Programming as their shared language, more fluent than English. Real teaching doesn't announce itself with lectures or lesson plans. It happens in the spaces between problems where both people emerge stronger without quite realizing they've been transformed. The thought settled somewhere behind Maggie's breastbone, warming a place that had felt frozen since her divorce. Since before that, maybe. Since she'd chosen quarterly earnings over family dinners, board presentations over birthday parties, corporate conquest over human connection. 4:30 a.m. brought Lily's head drooping toward the keyboard. Dave noticed immediately, abandoned his terminal to drape his jacket over her small shoulders as she curled onto the break room couch. The Triceratops found its way into her arms. She was asleep before he'd finished tucking the fabric around her. When he returned, Maggie was pouring coffee from the pot she'd started an hour ago. They stood together at the kitchenette counter, two people who'd been strangers 72 hours ago, now bound by conspiracy and desperate hope. "You're a good father, Dave." "Trying. Mostly improvising." He accepted the mug she offered. "Lisa would have been better at this. She had patience, vision. I'm just trying not to mess up too badly." "You're not messing up at all." They drank in silence, fatigue settling into bones. Through the lab's floor-to-ceiling windows, Boston was still dark, but that particular quality of pre-dawn darkness that promised morning whether you were ready or not. "Can I ask about her, your wife?" Dave's hands tightened around the ceramic, then deliberately relaxed. "Lisa Chen. We met at a tech conference in 1998. She was presenting research on neural networks. I was there representing Microplex. She made artificial intelligence sound like poetry." He smiled at the memory. "We were married 8 months later. Everybody said too fast, but when you know, you know. Lily came along in 2014, planned pregnancy, wanted pregnancy. Lisa had it all mapped out: maternity leave, part-time consulting balance." The smile faded. "Cancer doesn't care about your plans. Pancreatic. They found it during what should have been a routine checkup. Stage 4. Inoperable. She fought anyway. Clinical trials, experimental treatments, everything insurance wouldn't cover. We burned through savings, retirement accounts borrowed against the house that was already underwater from the crash." His voice stayed level, clinical, like he was describing someone else's tragedy. "She made it 6 months from diagnosis. Died at home with hospice care because hospitals cost too much, and she wanted Lily's last memories to be somewhere that felt safe." Maggie's throat closed. "Dave, don't." Gentle but firm. "I'm not looking for sympathy, just answering your question honestly. Lisa was extraordinary. Brilliant mind, generous heart. The kind of person who made everyone around her want to be better. Losing her nearly broke me. Would have broken me, except Lily needed someone to show up. So I showed up." He met Maggie's eyes. "You asked yesterday what the war taught me. It taught me that survival isn't about strength. It's about showing up when every cell in your body is screaming to run. Lisa's death taught me the same lesson. You don't get through trauma by being tough. You get through by being stubborn enough to take the next breath, then the next, then the next." Maggie reached out her hand, finding his on the counter. No romantic intention, just human contact between two people who'd survived losses that should have destroyed them. "I was married once, divorced in 2003. We were wrong for each other from the start. I wanted Sterling, he wanted a wife who'd play supporting role in his life. We fought for 5 years before admitting what everyone else already knew: no children. I told myself it was for the best, that I wasn't cut out for motherhood." She looked at Lily sleeping on the couch. "Now I wonder if I just never found the right reason to try." "You would have been a good mother." Dave's voice carried certainty. "You're good with Lily, patient. You listen to her like she's a colleague, not a child. Kids her age need that more than condescension disguised as kindness." Their eyes held for 3 seconds. Something passed between them, not quite romance, but deeper than friendship. Recognition of shared wounds, permission to be broken without judgment. Then Maggie's phone buzzed against the counter. They stepped apart as she checked the screen, and her expression shifted from warmth to stone. "Security downstairs. Someone tried accessing the building at 4:53 a.m. Marcus Brennan. He was denied entry because it's not his scheduled time, but the guard logged it." Dave's military training kicked in immediately. "He's checking if you're here, trying to confirm his suspicions." "Which means he knows we're doing something." Maggie pulled up the security system on her phone, fingers flying across the interface. "I'm going to check access logs for the past 24 hours. What she found made her breath catch. He accessed the network remotely yesterday at 9:47 a.m. Sunday morning from his personal laptop. Tried to pull our R&D project files. Did he get anything? Guardian's encrypted and the prototype is on isolated systems, but she scrolled through the logs, ice crystallizing in her veins. He copied 35% of the framework before our security protocols kicked him out. Enough to understand what we're building. Maybe enough to claim he discovered it himself. Dave crossed to his workstation, fingers already moving. Then we need insurance. Proof of authorship he can't fake. He pulled up code they'd written, began typing with focused precision. Maggie watched over his shoulder as he embedded something into Guardian's core architecture patterns that looked like random variable names, comment structures that seemed unremarkable, mathematical constants that served dual purposes. Your father taught me this. Digital signature hidden in plain sight. See these variable names? DC_LC_MS. Dave Chen Lily, Chen Margaret Sterling. And here, he highlighted a section. The timestamp encoded in hexadecimal, today's date. If Marcus presents this code as his discovery, forensic analysis will prove we wrote it first. He could remove the signatures. Not without breaking the entire system. They're woven into the logic. Change one and the encryption fails. Any competent expert witness would spot it immediately. Lily's voice drifted from the couch, sleepy but alert. We should add more, multiple layers. Make it impossible to steal without leaving evidence. She sat up, rubbing her eyes with one hand while already reaching for her tablet with the other. Within minutes, she'd designed 17 additional signatures embedded throughout Guardian's codebase, some obvious to trained programmers, others requiring sophisticated analysis to detect. If he tries to present this as his work, we'll bury him in evidence. Determination sharpened Lily's young features. Nobody steals from my dad and gets away with it. Dave looked at his daughter with complicated emotion, pride mixed with concern that she was learning too young how to fight corporate espionage. But Maggie felt something else entirely. This child had Dave's brilliance and his integrity. She'd watched her father struggle and refused to let that struggle be meaningless. 8 years old and already understanding that some battles were worth fighting even when victory wasn't guaranteed. They worked until 6:15, layering protections into the code. Then Maggie's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered warily. Ms. Sterling, Senator Thomas Reeves. Dave Chen gave me your number. She shot Dave a questioning look. He mouthed, "Tell her," and nodded. Senator, thank you for calling. Dave says you're facing a hostile acquisition with potential national security implications. He also says the buyer has complex ownership structures involving shell companies that may obscure beneficial ownership. I'd like to hear more. Maggie laid out the situation. Ventura Corp's acquisition Guardian technology, the risk that advanced security architecture might end up controlled by entities with opaque accountability. She kept it factual, professional, let the implications speak for themselves. Reeves listened without interrupting. When she finished, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to command. I'm on the Commerce Committee's Technology Oversight Panel. We have jurisdiction over acquisitions involving dual-use technologies. If there are legitimate concerns about ownership, transparency, and security clearance issues, I can attend your board meeting as a governmental observer. My presence alone might change the calculus. Would you do that? Dave Chen saved my life in Kuwait, carried me 3 miles through enemy territory with a bullet in his leg and shrapnel in his arm. He collapsed the second we reached our lines. I woke up in a field hospital. He woke up with a Purple Heart and permanent limp. If he says you're worth helping, that's all I need to know. After they disconnected, Maggie turned to Dave with something close to awe. You saved a senator's life and never mentioned it. Wasn't relevant. He looked genuinely uncomfortable with the attention. Wasn't Dave, that's extraordinary. It's what you do. Someone's down, you pick them up. Doesn't matter if they're a private or an officer or some guy who ends up in Congress 20 years later. You don't leave people behind. The simple statement of principle landed with weight. Maggie thought about Sterling's culture, about how many people she'd left behind in her climb to the corner office. How many maintenance workers and janitors and night shift security guards had kept the infrastructure running while she collected accolades and assumed credit belonged only to the names on executive letterhead. I've been leaving people behind my whole career, just never noticed because I was too busy moving forward. Dave's expression softened. You're noticing now. That counts. 7 a.m. brought Lily fully awake and demanding breakfast. They cleaned up the lab, erased evidence of their all-night session, secured the Guardian prototype on encrypted drives. By 7:45 they were walking to a diner 3 blocks from Sterling headquarters, not Rosie's, which was too close to Maggie's usual patterns, but a place called Mike's where construction workers and truckers fueled up before shifts. The waitress didn't recognize Maggie. The other customers didn't look twice at the woman in designer jeans sitting with a maintenance worker and his kid. For the first time in decades, Maggie felt invisible. It was oddly liberating. Lily demolished a stack of pancakes while explaining to Maggie the difference between procedural and object-oriented programming languages. Dave ate quietly, checking his phone, tension visible in the set of his shoulders. "What's wrong?" "Text from the weekend maintenance supervisor, asking why I wasn't on rounds last night. Someone noticed. Tell him you were dealing with an urgent executive request." Maggie pulled out her own phone, typed quickly, showed Dave the screen. "I'm sending official authorization retroactively. Emergency building systems assessment at my direction. Covers you completely." Relief flickered across his face, immediately followed by something else. Discomfort, maybe. The awkwardness of accepting help from someone whose social position was so different from his own. "You don't have to do that." "Yes, I do. You're taking enormous risks to help me. Least I can do is make sure you don't lose your job in the process." Their eyes met across the table. Lily glanced between them, grinned around a mouthful of syrup-soaked pancake. "You two are going to get married, aren't you?" Dave nearly choked on his coffee. Maggie felt heat flood her cheeks. "Lily Chen, that is absolutely what I'm just saying, what I see. You look at each other the same way Mom and Dad looked at each other in the old photos, like you're surprised the other person is real. We barely know each other." But Maggie's voice lacked conviction. "You know each other where it counts. The rest is just details." Lily returned to her pancakes with the satisfied air of someone who'd spoken an obvious truth. Dave caught Maggie's eye and something passed between them again. Not agreement exactly. More like acknowledgement that 8-year-olds sometimes saw clearly what adults worked hard to ignore. After breakfast, Dave and Lily headed home to shower and change for the battle ahead. Maggie returned to her apartment where she stood under scalding water until her skin turned pink and her mind stopped spinning long enough to focus. The dinner with Marcus. She'd almost forgotten. She dried off dressed with deliberate care. Not a power suit that would signal confrontation. Instead, a simple navy dress, pearls that had belonged to her mother, low heels. The outfit said, "I'm here to listen," while the pearls whispered, "But I'm nobody's fool." The Wellington occupied the top floor of one of Boston's historic buildings, all brass and mahogany, and waiters who'd been opening wine bottles since the Nixon administration. Marcus was already seated when Maggie arrived at 7:03, late enough to signal she wasn't desperate, early enough to avoid rudeness. He stood as she approached, and for a moment she saw the young man her father had hired 41 years ago. Ambitious, brilliant, hungry to prove himself. When had that hunger curdled into something poisonous? "You look exhausted, Maggie. It's been a long weekend." He poured wine, a Bordeaux that probably cost more than Dave's weekly paycheck. "That's why I wanted this dinner. I'm worried about you. This transition doesn't have to be painful." The concern in his voice sounded so genuine that Maggie felt a flicker of doubt. Could she be wrong? Could 3 years of emails be elaborate misunderstanding? Then she remembered Operation Legacy Wipe. "Tell me, Marcus, when exactly did you decide that selling Sterling was in the company's best interest?" Something flickered in his eyes, too fast to identify, gone before she could be certain she'd seen it. "You know how I feel about Sterling. This isn't what I wanted, but the market has shifted. Ventura Corp offers us resources scale security we can't achieve alone." "Security." Maggie tasted the word. "Is that what you call Operation Legacy Wipe?" His hand froze halfway to his wine glass, just for a second. Then he smiled, perfectly controlled. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Maggie." "No, just a phrase I came across, probably nothing important." She sipped her wine, watching him recalibrate. He'd shown his hand. Not much, but enough. He knew she was searching, and he was scared of what she might find. Marcus changed tactics, leaning forward with the intimacy of old friendship. "Maggie, we've known each other 40 years. Don't let this business deal destroy that. Your father would want you to be practical, not emotional. The invocation of her father made rage flare behind Maggie's ribs, but she kept her face serene. Would he tell me, Marcus, did you and my father ever discuss Richard Whitfield? This time the reaction was unmistakable. His face went tight-colored, draining, then flooding back. What does my father have to do with anything? Just curious. They were colleagues at MIT, weren't they, before the falling out? Ancient history. Is it? Maggie set down her wine glass with deliberate precision. Or is history exactly what this is about? Marcus's mask slipped completely. For 3 seconds she saw raw fury in his face, decades of resentment that had been festering beneath professional courtesy. Your father destroyed mine. The words came out flat, factual. That's not what happened. You weren't there, Maggie. You don't know. I know enough. She stood. We're not going to resolve this over dinner. I'll see you tomorrow at the board meeting, Marcus. She left 320s on the table and walked out. Behind her, she heard Marcus on his phone before she'd even reached the elevator. She knows something. I don't know what, but she's planning a countermove. Find out who she's been meeting with. Outside, the April evening had turned cold. Maggie pulled her coat tight and started walking, needing movement to process the confirmation of everything she'd suspected. Marcus had spent 4 decades positioning himself for this revenge. 4 decades of patience and planning and pretending to care. Her phone buzzed. Text from Dave. How did it go? She typed back. He knows we're on to him. Be ready for anything tomorrow. Always am. Get some sleep. Big day ahead. Sleep felt impossible, but Maggie returned to her apartment and forced herself through the motions, shower pajamas, chamomile tea bed. She lay in darkness, watching city lights pattern the ceiling, thinking about Dave and Lily in their Dorchester apartment, about her father's hidden room, about Guardian waiting to be born. Somewhere around 2 a.m. exhaustion finally claimed her. Monday morning arrived with crystalline clarity. Maggie woke at 5:30, unable to sleep longer despite bone-deep fatigue. She dressed in the Navy power suit she'd bought for her fortune cover photo shoot, armor for battle. The pearls stayed. Her father's watch engraved with his motto. Wedding ring she still wore on her right hand, not from sentiment but habit. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. 3 days ago she'd been ready to die. Now she was ready to fight. Her phone showed a text from Dave sent at 5:47 a.m. Lily and I are ready. See you at the battlefield. And one from Harold Jenkins. Marcus called emergency pre-meeting for 11 a.m. He's bringing Alexander Hayes from Ventura Corp as guest. This is highly irregular. Be warned. Maggie typed responses to both, then sat at her dining table. She thought about writing to Dylan, her estranged son in Seattle, but decided against it. If she survived today, she'd call him. If she didn't, he probably wouldn't care enough to notice the difference. By 10:45, Maggie was in the Sterling lobby. Dave and Lily arrived at 10:50, and the sight of them settled something in her chest. Dave wore his slightly outdated suit pressed within an inch of its life. Lily wore a flowered dress and looked simultaneously adorable and fiercely intelligent. Senator Reeves strode in at 10:55, silver-haired and commanding in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Dave's car. He shook Dave's hand with the bone-deep recognition of men who'd bled together. "Chen, good to see you, soldier." "Senator." Reeves knelt to Lily's level. "Your dad saved my life, young lady. He ever tell you about Kuwait?" "No, sir. Dad doesn't talk about the war." "Never did. Too busy doing the job while everybody else talked about it." He stood, addressed Maggie. "Miss Sterling, I've reviewed Ventura Corp's ownership structure. The Commerce Committee has concerns about transparency and beneficial ownership disclosure. My presence today is official oversight." "Thank you for coming." They rode the elevator to the executive floor in silence. Through the glass walls of the boardroom, Maggie could see Marcus mid-presentation Alexander Hayes beside him. The screen showed Guardian Framework's stolen data presented as Marcus's discovery. Harold Jenkins emerged, expression grave. "Maggie, you need to see this." Inside the boardroom, Marcus was weaving a narrative that made Maggie's work look like negligence and his theft look like salvation. He'd found Guardian in the archives true. He'd recognized its potential true. He'd spent the weekend developing a proof of concept to show the board what Sterling was capable of under proper leadership. The board members looked impressed, concerned, ready to believe that Maggie had sat on revolutionary technology while the company's value deteriorated. However, Marcus continued, voice heavy with regret, this discovery raises troubling questions. Miss Sterling has known about Guardian for years but never prioritized development. She also granted unauthorized system access this weekend to non-technical personnel. He pulled up security logs showing Dave and Lily entering the building, including maintenance staff and a minor child. She's been operating outside board oversight, possibly compromising proprietary systems. Patricia Okoye frowned. Marcus, this feels like an ambush. Maggie deserves the chance to respond. She'll have that opportunity at 2 p.m. I simply wanted the board aware of all relevant facts. The meeting broke at 11:45. Marcus emerged, saw Maggie with Dave, Lily, and Senator Reeves, and his confident expression cracked. Maggie, you brought guests. Senator Thomas Reeves, Commerce Committee Technology Oversight. Reeves's voice carried unmistakable authority. I'm here observing proceedings given the national security implications. National security. Marcus forced a laugh. This is a straightforward corporate transaction. Is it Ventura Corp's ownership structure involves nested shell companies across Delaware, Nevada, and offshore jurisdictions with beneficial owners who may have historically problematic relationships with federal security clearances. Defense Department takes an interest when advanced security architecture potentially transfers to entities with opaque accountability. Marcus turned to Maggie, desperation edging his composure. Really bringing government interference into private business? Your father would be ashamed. Don't, ice in Maggie's voice. Don't presume to know what my father would think. I knew Robert Sterling for 40 years, and yet he never told you about Guardian. Wonder why that is. Dave spoke up, quiet but firm. Maybe because he knew who he could trust with his real work. Marcus finally looked at Dave, really looked, and recognition dawned. Dave Chen, the maintenance worker, Robert's forgotten partner. Not forgotten, just invisible to people who only see titles. They stood in the corridor, battle lines drawn until Marcus turned and walked away. But Maggie saw him on his phone before he'd rounded the corner, voice urgent and angry. At 1:55 p.m., the board reconvened, all 11 members plus Maggie, Marcus as CFO, Senator Reeves as observer, Dave and Lily as guests at Maggie's invitation. Patricia Okoye raised an objection. Board meetings aren't appropriate venues for children. Lily Chen isn't a typical child. She's a key contributor to Guardian development. The board deserves to hear from all project participants. Project participants. Marcus's voice dripped condescension. Maggie, you can't seriously claim a weekend hobby project. I claim that Sterling Security has completed proof of concept for revolutionary supply chain security, and we're prepared to demonstrate. Harold Jenkins gestured permission. Proceed. Maggie stood, moved to the podium, felt the weight of 40 years settling on her shoulders. 43 years ago, my father founded Sterling Security on one principle: technology should protect people, not exploit their vulnerabilities. Guardian represents that principle's evolution, applying proven encryption concepts to physical supply chains. Market projections, $15 billion by 2030. The screen changed, showing Guardian's architecture. Not the stolen framework Marcus had presented, but the complete prototype with embedded signatures and functional demonstrations. Dave Chen will explain the technical architecture. Then Lily Chen will demonstrate live security features. Dave stood and the maintenance worker disappeared completely. In his place stood the engineer who'd helped build the foundation of modern computing. Innovation doesn't come from corner offices. It comes from people who understand problems deeply because they've lived them, not just studied them in case studies. He walked them through Guardian's three-layer approach: physical tracking, cryptographic verification, tamper detection. explained the mathematics without drowning them in jargon, made complex concepts accessible without being condescending. Patricia Okoye interrupted. Dave, you mentioned quantum cryptography principles. That's cutting-edge research. How did a... She caught herself. Because I'm not just a maintenance worker. I'm the co-inventor of Project Sentinel. I worked with Robert Sterling from 1985 to 95. Before corporate downsizing destroyed my career and rewrote my narrative. Shock around the table. Marcus's face went white. Maggie added, every patent Sterling holds on Sentinel encryption includes work Dave contributed. His name was omitted due to non-compete agreements, but the contributions were real and essential. Dave continued. The code speaks for itself. Lily, please run the demonstration. Lily approached the console, tiny against the massive screens, but her fingers flew across the keyboard with absolute confidence. Loading Guardian demo environment. Simulating package shipment through 4 checkpoints. The screen showed an animated supply chain package moving smoothly, green indicators at each checkpoint. Now I'm compromising checkpoint 3, opening package inserting counterfeit component resealing. Her fingers danced. At checkpoint 3, the package icon flashed red. Security breach. Checkpoint 3, seal integrity compromised. Guardian detected tampering immediately. Even though I resealed perfectly, the crypto signature broke. The system knows something's wrong. Board member Richard Walsh asked, what prevents a sophisticated attacker from forging a new signature? Good question. Lily addressed him with the ease of someone who'd never learned to be intimidated by adults. Each checkpoint signs using mathematical functions that are computationally easy to verify but effectively impossible to reverse. Even with unlimited computing power, forging a valid signature would take longer than the current age of the universe. Patricia Okoye stared. How old are you? 8. But I've been coding since I was 5. Dad taught me, she said it matter-of-factly. Code doesn't care about your age or background. It only cares if your logic is sound. That's why I prefer programming to people. Computers are fair. Silence in the boardroom. Not the awkward kind, but the weighted pause of people reassessing everything they thought they understood. Then Marcus stood clapping slowly, sarcastic applause that made Maggie's jaw tighten. Impressive demonstration, truly, but the board deserves full context. He activated his own presentation. I discovered Guardian Framework Saturday evening during routine archive security review. Further investigation revealed this code was written this weekend, not decades ago. Ms. Sterling, Mr. Chen and his daughter created this prototype in 72 hours using company resources without board authorization. They also compromised email security protocols and granted an 8-year-old child access to Sterling's core systems. These are terminable offenses. Harold Jenkins looked troubled. Maggie, is this accurate? Senator Reeves interjected before she could answer. Board meetings exist for strategic decisions, not HR violations. The question before you is whether Guardian represents viable innovation worth preserving Sterling's independence. No. Marcus's voice rose. Because Guardian isn't Sterling innovation. My father developed these encryption concepts at MIT. Robert Sterling appropriated them, destroyed my father's career, and built his empire on stolen work. Every eye turned to him. Maggie felt the room's temperature drop. Dave cut him off, voice flat. That's a lie. The word shocked the room into silence. I studied the 1981 patent case when Robert first approached me. Victor Brennan tried to claim sole authorship of genuinely collaborative work. The court ruled in Robert's favor because the evidence was overwhelming. You don't understand. Marcus's composure shattered completely. I spent my entire life hearing how Robert Sterling was a genius while my father was nothing. Forgotten. I couldn't let that stand. So you spent 40 years planning revenge. Maggie stood, voice steady despite fury burning in her chest. Infiltrated my company, became my closest friend, waited for the perfect moment to destroy everything my father built. She activated the screen displaying Marcus's emails with Ventura Corp, starting in January 2022. Operation Legacy Wipe, highlighted in red. The board members read in stunned silence. Patricia Okoye read aloud. Sterling Brand retired within 18 months. Sentinel patents transferred to VC portfolio. All historical attribution to Robert Sterling removed. She looked at Marcus with something approaching horror. You weren't planning acquisition. You were planning erasure. Marcus saw his carefully constructed world collapsing. My father deserved recognition. Robert Sterling ruined his life. No. Dave's voice cut through the chaos. Victor Brennan ruined his own life by letting ego destroy partnership, and you're repeating his mistake. Revenge is poison you drink yourself hoping someone else dies. The only person it destroys is the one holding the cup. Harold Jenkins called the room to order, but his hands shook with anger. Given these revelations, I move to 1. Suspend the Ventura Corp acquisition pending investigation. 2. Remove Marcus Brennan as CFO effective immediately. 3. Authorize full Guardian development under Ms. Sterling's leadership. All in favor. The votes came swift and unanimous. Suspension 11-0, removal 11-0, authorization 10-1. Marcus sat frozen as 40 years of planning evaporated in 90 seconds. He gathered his papers with trembling hands, looked at Maggie with something beyond hatred. This isn't over. Senator Reeves's voice carried military steel. I'd enjoy watching you explain to federal prosecutors why you conducted a 3-year sabotage campaign against an American defense contractor. Marcus went pale. He left without another word. The boardroom emptied slowly. Harold Jenkins approached Dave, extended his hand. Mr. Chen, on behalf of this board, I apologize. We'll amend all historical records, issue retroactive compensation. I don't need retroactive anything, but I would like a job. Name your position. Chief Technology Officer, Guardian Development Lead. Flexible hours because I'm a single father, and I want to establish a STEM scholarship fund for underprivileged students. Harold didn't hesitate. Done. Welcome to the executive team. Lily tugged Dave's sleeve. Does this mean we can move? We can move anywhere you want, kiddo. I want to stay Dorchester. Our neighbor's my school. Money doesn't change who we are, Dad. Dave pulled her into a hug. Smart girl. Evening found Maggie and Dave walking along Boston Harbor, Lily running ahead to chase seagulls. The sun was setting, painting the water gold and crimson. So, Chief Technology Officer, how does it feel? Terrifying. I haven't managed a team in 15 years. You completed Guardian in 72 hours. You'll be fine. They walked in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who've been through battle together. About that dinner I mentioned, Dave said carefully. Still interested? Maggie stopped, faced him. Dave, I need honesty. I'm 62, divorced workaholic with zero idea how to have a normal relationship. I don't know if I can be what you need. I'm 58, widowed, terrified I'll fail. I have a daughter who needs stability, not chaos. I don't know if I can be what you need either. They looked at each other, then both started laughing. We're a disaster. Complete mess. Want to try anyway? Dave took her hand. Yeah, let's try. Lily ran back, grinning. Are you two going to kiss? Because that would be awkward, but also kind of nice. They didn't kiss. Not yet. But holding hands as the sun set over the harbor felt like beginning something that might actually last. Tuesday morning arrived with the particular exhaustion that follows adrenaline crashes. Maggie woke in her Beacon Hill apartment. She and Dave had agreed to maintain separate residences until the legal situation resolved, and for a moment couldn't remember why her entire body ached. Then memory flooded back: the board vote, Marcus's removal, Guardian's authorization, Dave's hand in hers as the sun set over Boston Harbor. She showered, dressed in a charcoal suit that projected confidence without arrogance, and was pulling into Sterling's garage by 7:15. The executive floor hummed with unusual energy. News of Monday's dramatic reversal had spread through the company overnight, and Maggie could feel the shift in how people looked at her, no longer the CEO presiding over decline, but the leader who'd fought back and won. Dave arrived at 7:30, still looking uncertain in the executive suite. His new ID badge said Chief Technology Officer, but his body language screamed maintenance worker trying not to get caught where he didn't belong. Coffee. Maggie gestured to the pot she'd started. Yeah, thanks. He accepted the mug, settled into the chair across from her desk. So, we won. We won the battle. War's probably just starting. Optimistic. Realistic. She pulled up her email, scanned the overnight accumulation. Marcus will appeal. Ventura Corp might sue for breach of negotiation. Our insurance premiums are about to skyrocket because we just removed our CFO mid-acquisition. And somewhere right now, competitors are trying to figure out how to steal Guardian before we can patent it. Dave absorbed this without visible reaction. You forgot the part where we have to actually build Guardian into something customers will pay for. That too. She closed her laptop, met his eyes. Scared? Terrified. You? Same. A smile tugged at her mouth. But yesterday we completed a functional prototype in 72 hours and exposed a 40-year conspiracy. I think we can handle Tuesday morning. They spent the next hour mapping immediate priorities. Dave needed office space, administrative support, budget authority. Guardian required dedicated engineering team, secure development environment, patent attorney. The board wanted weekly progress reports, risk assessments, contingency planning. The list was overwhelming until they broke it into incremental steps. Dave's military training emerged in how he approached complex problems, identify the objective, assess available resources, establish achievable milestones, execute with discipline. First week, assemble core team. Second week, formalize Guardian architecture. Third week, file provisional patents. Fourth week, pitch to 3 potential customers for early feedback. He looked up from his notes. 12-week timeline to proof of market viability. Can Sterling fund that? Barely. But yes. Then let's do this properly. No shortcuts, no assumptions. We build Guardian right or we don't build it at all. At 8:45, Maggie's assistant knocked. Ms. Sterling, you have a visitor. Dylan Sterling. He says he's your son. Maggie's stomach dropped. My son. He's in Seattle. He flew in this morning. Says it's urgent. Dave stood immediately. I'll give you privacy. No, stay. The words came out more forcefully than intended. Please, you're going to meet him eventually. Dylan entered like someone expecting ambush. 38 years old, wearing Seattle Tech casual expensive jeans, fleece vest, sneakers that cost more than Dave's suit. He stopped when he saw Dave's confusion flickering across his face. Mom, didn't realize you had a meeting. Dylan, this is Dave Chen, our new CTO. Dave, my son Dylan. They shook hands. Dylan's grip assessing. His eyes moved between them, clearly trying to decode their relationship. I read about the board vote, saw the press release. His tone carried accusation. You didn't mention fighting a hostile takeover when we talked last week. It happened fast. I wasn't sure. You weren't sure, so you didn't tell your own son Sterling almost got sold. Dylan's voice rose. I had to learn about it from TechCrunch. Do you know how that felt? Maggie absorbed the anger without deflecting. He was right. She'd compartmentalized Dylan along with every other personal relationship, assuming he wouldn't care about corporate drama. You're absolutely right. I should have called. I'm sorry. The apology seemed to deflate him. Dylan sank into a chair, rubbing his face. I came here ready for a fight. You're not supposed to just apologize. I've spent 62 years being defensive when I should have been honest, trying something different. Dylan looked at Dave, still trying to figure out the dynamic. So you're the new CTO. That's a big job. Where were you before Sterling? Dave's answer was characteristically direct. Here, maintenance department 15 years. Before that, Microplex Systems until the financial crisis. Before that, IBM. Wait, you've been working here 15 years in maintenance and Mom just promoted you to CTO. It's more complicated than that. Maggie outlined the story, her father's collaboration with Dave Sentinel encryption Guardian's completion over the weekend. Dylan listened with analytical focus inherited from her. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. So, Grandpa worked with a software engineer who got pushed out of the industry, and now that engineer is running technology for the company Grandpa built. That's one way to frame it. And you two are... He let the question hang. Heat climbed Maggie's neck. "We're colleagues. And friends. And it's complicated, Dylan. You're dating him." "I wouldn't use that word exactly." "Mom, I've seen you interact with colleagues and friends. You don't look at them like that." He gestured between them. "This is different." Dave cleared his throat. "I should probably let you two talk." "No, stay." Dylan's voice softened. "Look, I don't know you, Mr. Chen, but my mother has spent my entire life married to Sterling Security. If you're making her think about something beyond quarterly earnings, that's probably good. Just be careful with her, okay? She's tougher than she looks, but that's mostly armor." The protective instinct in his voice made Maggie's eyes sting. When had Dylan become someone who worried about her welfare? "I'm sitting right here." "I know. And you're terrible at accepting care from people. Always have been." Dylan came around the desk and pulled Maggie into an awkward hug. "I'm glad you didn't sell. Grandpa would be proud you fought for it. He'd be prouder that I finally started recognizing the people who actually built it." She squeezed her son's shoulders. "Thank you for coming. Means more than you know." "Yeah, well, I took the red-eye because I was pissed. Might as well stay through the weekend. You free for dinner tonight?" "Absolutely. Both of you. I want to hear the whole story." After Dylan left to check into his hotel, Maggie sagged against her desk. Dave moved closer, hand finding hers. That went better than expected. "He flew across the country to yell at me, then ended up inviting us to dinner. I don't understand what just happened." "You apologized, took responsibility, treated him like an adult instead of a problem to manage." Dave's thumb traced circles on her wrist. "People respond to honesty, Maggie, even when it's uncomfortable." The day blurred into succession of meetings. Guardian engineering team interviews, patent attorney consultations, damage control with nervous investors who'd seen the press coverage and wanted reassurance Sterling wasn't imploding. By 6 p.m., Maggie was exhausted but energized in a way she hadn't felt in years. Dinner with Dylan at a steakhouse in the financial district proved surprisingly easy. Over aged ribeye and expensive wine, they walked him through the full story. Dylan asked sharp questions, pushed back when details didn't align, thought in systems and dependencies like the Amazon engineer he was. When Dave explained Guardian's Byzantine fault tolerance, Dylan's eyes lit up with genuine interest. They spent 20 minutes diving into technical architecture, and Maggie watched her son bond with her boyfriend partner over cryptographic proofs and database optimization. Dylan insisted on paying. "Consider it celebrating your victory over Ventura Corp." He raised his wine glass. "To Sterling Security. May it stay independent and ornery for another 40 years. They toasted. Then Dylan turned to Dave with calculated casualness. "So, what are your intentions regarding my mother?" Dave nearly choked on his wine. Maggie kicked her son under the table. "Dylan, for God's sake." "I'm serious. You're the first person she's dated since Dad, and that ended 20 years ago. I want to know you're not going to hurt her or use her or any of the things that happen when there's a power imbalance." "Dylan," warning in Maggie's voice. But Dave met Dylan's eyes directly. "Your mother saved my life by giving me purpose when I'd forgotten I was capable of more than fixing broken things. She saw past 15 years of invisibility to recognize someone worth investing in. You want to know my intentions? I intend to show up every day and try to deserve that faith. I intend to build something lasting alongside her professionally and personally, and I intend to be honest when I'm scared or uncertain because that's the only way trust survives." Silence at the table. Then Dylan nodded, tension releasing from his shoulders. "Okay, that's a good answer." The week that followed established new rhythms. Dave assembled his engineering team, 8 brilliant people the industry had discarded as obsolete. Maggie navigated board politics, investor relations, strategic planning. They saw each other in meetings, stolen moments in hallways, late-night text messages when neither could sleep. The relationship existed in professional spaces, carefully maintained boundaries, not hiding exactly but not broadcasting either. They were figuring out how to be colleagues and something more simultaneously, and the learning curve was steep. Friday afternoon brought unwelcome news. Harold Jenkins called an emergency board meeting for Monday morning. Marcus had filed suit, wrongful termination, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress. He was claiming the board vote was invalid because Maggie had presented fabricated evidence. He's also alleging corporate espionage and misappropriation of resources. Harold's voice was grave over speakerphone. And he's specifically targeting Dave's credentials, claiming the promotion was, he hesitated, payment for sexual favors. Dave's voice was flat. Let me guess. Harold's silence confirmed it. Fury rose in Maggie's chest. He's going to destroy us in court even if he loses. The publicity alone, which is exactly his strategy. Patricia Okoye's voice joined the call. Wall Street Journal already picked it up. They're running Marcus's side without waiting for our response. After the call ended, Maggie and Dave sat in her office processing. This could ruin everything. Guardian development, your position, Sterling's reputation. Then we fight. Dave's calm was almost eerie. Marcus spent 40 years planning revenge. We spent 72 hours building Guardian. I know which effort was more productive. You're not worried, terrified, but worry doesn't change what we have to do. We document everything, tell the truth, and trust that reality matters more than narrative. Monday's board meeting was tense. Members who'd backed Maggie enthusiastically on voting day now looked nervous. Lawsuits and negative press made even allies cautious. Let's address this directly. Maggie stood at the head of the table. Marcus Brennan filed suit alleging misconduct. Here are the facts. I accessed his email using executive authority after discovering evidence of sabotage. Every action I took was within my rights as CEO investigating potential malfeasance. Dave Chen's credentials speak for themselves. Co-inventor of Sentinel, 15 years of institutional knowledge, technical expertise we desperately need. Patricia raised her hand. The optics of your relationship complicate that defense. If opposing counsel demonstrates romantic involvement concurrent with his promotion, then we disclose it. Dave spoke up. Maggie and I are involved personally. That relationship began after my promotion, but I understand how it appears. If the board believes my position creates liability, I'll resign effective immediately. No. Steel in Maggie's voice. Dave stays. We disclose the relationship to avoid impropriety, but we don't surrender to Marcus's intimidation. He spent 40 years planning revenge. We're not letting him win through litigation what he lost through board vote. Harold Jenkins studied them both. You're certain because once we go public, there's no walking it back. I'm certain. Maggie looked at Dave. We both are. The board voted to authorize aggressive legal defense, full disclosure of the relationship, and PR campaign highlighting Guardian's potential. Not unanimous, 3 members abstained, but enough. After the meeting, Patricia pulled Maggie aside. You're betting Sterling's future on someone you've known less than 2 weeks. Are you absolutely sure? Maggie didn't hesitate. Dave Chen is the most qualified person I've ever worked with. He's also the most honest. If I have to choose between his integrity and board members who care more about optics than truth, I choose him every time. The PR battle consumed October. Marcus's legal team leaked selective details to sympathetic journalists. Sterling's counteroffensive focused on Guardian's innovation, Dave's legitimate credentials, Marcus's documented betrayal. Public opinion split predictably. Tech blogs celebrated the underdog story. Business publications questioned Sterling's judgment. Social media dissected every detail with varying accuracy. Through it all, Dave maintained almost supernatural calm. He gave exactly one interview to a Wired reporter who'd covered his IBM work decades ago. I fixed elevators for 15 years because that was honest work that fed my daughter. I'm CTO now because Maggie Sterling recognized that building elevators and building software require the same fundamental skill, understanding how systems work and making them better. Marcus Brennan sees that as scandal. I see it as proof that talent doesn't expire just because corporate America decides you're obsolete. The quote went viral. Suddenly, Dave wasn't just Sterling's CTO. He was a symbol of second chances of expertise mattering more than pedigree. But victories in PR didn't translate to victories in court. Marcus's attorneys filed for immediate injunction to halt Guardian development, freeze Dave's appointment, and place Sterling under independent oversight. The preliminary hearing was set for November 15th. 2 weeks before the hearing, Maggie woke at 4:30 a.m. after 90 minutes of fitful sleep. She gave up on rest and was in her office by 5:45. Dave found her there at 6:15, 2 coffees in hand. "Figured you'd be here." He set one mug in front of her. "You look terrible." "Romantic." "Honest." He sipped his coffee. "We need to talk about contingency planning. We're not going to lose." "Maggie, our attorneys give us 60-40 odds. Marcus has resources and nothing to lose. We need backup strategies." Before she could respond, her phone rang. Unknown number, Massachusetts area code. Maggie Sterling. "Ms. Sterling, this is Jennifer Brennan, Marcus's sister. We've never met, but I need to speak with you and Mr. Chen. In person today, if possible. I have information about my brother's lawsuit." They met at a coffee shop in Cambridge. Jennifer Brennan was 63, academic tweed, carrying the weathered dignity of someone who'd spent a career in unfashionable pursuits. "Mathematics professor at Boston University," she explained. "Marcus and I haven't spoken in 3 years. He cut me off when I refused to support his vendetta." She wrapped both hands around her tea mug. "I knew he was planning something, but I didn't realize the scope until the lawsuit became public." "Why contact us now?" Dave's tone was gentle but wary. "Because I found something. My father's papers archived at MIT. I've been cataloging them for a book about early encryption research." She pulled a folder from her bag. "These are copies of correspondence between Victor Brennan and Robert Sterling from 1980 to 81, before the patent dispute." Maggie opened the folder. Inside were letters on MIT letterhead, technical discussions interspersed with personal notes. The tone was collaborative, warm. One letter stopped her cold. "Robert, I've been thinking about our conversation regarding credit attribution. You're right that my ego got in the way of partnership. I wanted sole inventor status because I've spent my career in supporting roles, never the lead. But that's not how good work happens. Let's file the patent jointly or not at all. Your friendship matters more than my need for recognition." Victor, April 1981. Jennifer pointed to the date. 3 weeks before my father filed his solo patent application. He wrote that letter, then ignored his own better judgment and filed anyway. When Robert contested it, my father couldn't back down without admitting betrayal. So he doubled down, claimed Robert had stolen everything, and spent the rest of his life believing his own lie. "Why are you showing us this?" "Because Marcus is repeating the same pattern. He's convinced himself your father destroyed ours. But it's not true. My father destroyed himself through ego and insecurity. Marcus deserves to know that before he wastes his life on revenge." She pulled out another document. "I've prepared an affidavit for your legal team. Authenticated copies of the correspondence, expert testimony, sworn statement that Victor Brennan's narrative was self-serving fiction. It won't make the lawsuit disappear, but it might give the judge context." Dave spoke carefully. "Ms. Brennan, this will destroy any remaining relationship with your brother. Are you prepared for that?" "My brother destroyed our relationship when he chose hatred over truth. I'm a mathematician, Mr. Chen. I deal in proofs, not grievances. The evidence shows Robert Sterling acted honorably. Marcus needs to know that. So does the court." They spent 2 hours reviewing every document. When they finally emerged onto Massachusetts Avenue, Maggie felt lighter than she had in weeks. "Think it'll be enough?" Dave asked. "I think it's exactly what we needed. Not to win necessarily, but to fight with integrity intact." He took her hand in broad daylight. "No hiding, no shame. Whatever happens on the 15th, we'll handle it. Together." The preliminary hearing arrived with the inevitability of sunrise. Maggie woke in Dave's warehouse studio, where she'd been staying more often than her own apartment. They dressed in formal business attire and drove to the courthouse in contemplative silence. The courtroom filled with journalists, Sterling employees, curious observers. Marcus sat with his legal team, expression carefully neutral. He didn't look at Maggie or Dave. Judge Catherine Walsh took the bench precisely at 9 a.m. 68 appointed decades ago, reputation for efficiency and intolerance for theatrical nonsense. Marcus's attorney opened aggressively. Maggie had abused power to silence dissent, fabricated evidence against a whistleblower. Dave's promotion was obvious corruption reward for personal favors. Sterling's attorney countered with methodical precision. Marcus's emails were authenticated through independent forensics. His 3-year campaign was documented across multiple servers. His vendetta was rooted in family grievance unrelated to corporate malfeasance. Then came Jennifer Brennan's testimony. She took the stand with academic composure and systematically demolished her brother's narrative. The letters proved Victor Brennan's own complicity. The timeline demonstrated his decision to betray collaborative agreement. Most damning was her expert analysis showing Robert Sterling's contributions were mathematically more substantial than Victor's. Marcus's attorneys tried to impeach her credibility. Jennifer's response was devastating. "I'm a mathematician. I follow evidence to logical conclusions. The evidence shows my father made choices driven by ego. My brother is making the same choices. I love them both, but love doesn't require me to lie about mathematics or history." Judge Walsh called recess at noon. Sterling's team huddled cautiously optimistic. When court resumed at 1:30, Walsh delivered her ruling from the bench without preamble. The court finds Mr. Brennan's claims lack sufficient merit to warrant injunctive relief. Ms. Sterling's investigation was within her executive authority, given documented evidence of potential sabotage. Mr. Chen's credentials, while unconventional, are substantiated by independent verification. The personal relationship, while relevant to corporate governance, is not grounds for invalidating a board's business judgment. She paused, looking directly at Marcus. "Mr. Brennan, this court sympathizes with family grievances, but litigation is not group therapy. Your father's patent dispute was adjudicated 44 years ago. That judgment was correct then and remains correct now. Attempting to relitigate history through corporate warfare is abuse of process. Your lawsuit may proceed on defamation claims, but injunctive relief is denied." The gavel came down. Marcus sat frozen as his attorneys scrambled. Maggie felt Dave's hand find hers under the table. They'd won. Not completely defamation claims would drag on, but enough. Guardian could continue. Dave could stay. Sterling could move forward. Outside the courthouse, reporters mobbed them. Maggie delivered a prepared statement thanking the court and expressing hope Sterling could now focus on innovation. Dave stood beside her, silent support. As they pushed through the crowd, a voice called out, "Ms. Sterling, wait!" Jennifer Brennan, standing at the periphery. Maggie excused herself and walked over. "Thank you for everything." Jennifer's smile was sad. "I didn't do it for you. I did it for truth and for the memory of 2 brilliant men who should have stayed friends." She glanced toward the courthouse. "Marcus will appeal. He'll spend his remaining years fighting this. I can't stop him." "You tried. That matters." "Does it? Sometimes I think the truth just makes people dig deeper into their delusions." She buttoned her coat against the November chill. "Take care of Guardian, Ms. Sterling. My father and yours built something worth preserving." That evening, Sterling's leadership team gathered at a restaurant overlooking Boston Harbor. Not celebration too much remained uncertain, but acknowledgement they'd survived a battle that could have destroyed them. Harold Jenkins raised his glass. "To Sterling's security, battered but unbroken." They toasted. Patricia added, "And to unconventional CTOs who prove credentials matter less than capability." Dave endured the attention with characteristic discomfort, deflecting praise toward Lily and the engineering team. Later, when the party wound down, Maggie and Dave walked the waterfront. Thanksgiving was next week. Dylan was flying back to spend it with them. Lily had already planned the menu with frightening precision. "Your son invited me and Lily to join you. That okay?" "More than okay, it's perfect." They walked in comfortable silence. Finally, Dave stopped, turned to face her. "I need to tell you something. Remember that warehouse studio I gave notice on the lease?" Maggie's heart sank. "You're moving?" "Yes. Lily and I found a place in Cambridge. 3 bedrooms near her new school. Better STEM program." "That's wonderful. The thing is," he looked uncharacteristically nervous, "it has 3 bedrooms. 1 for Lily, 1 for me, 1 for guests. Or home office, or," he took a breath, "or for you if you wanted. Not immediately, not even soon." but eventually. If this us keeps working the way I think it might. Maggie's throat tightened. Dave Chen, are you asking me to eventually move in with you? I'm saying there's a room that could be yours if you ever wanted it. No pressure, no timeline, just possibility. She kissed him there on the waterfront with tourists streaming past and harbor lights reflecting on dark water. When they broke apart, she was crying and laughing simultaneously. Yes, eventually. When we're ready, yes. Yeah. They stood forehead to forehead, and Maggie marveled at how life could pivot so completely. 4 weeks ago she'd been ready to die. Now she was planning a future she'd never imagined wanting. Thanksgiving arrived cold and clear. They gathered at Dave's Dorchester apartment, cramped with 5 people but warm with unexpected family. Dylan, Dave, Lily, Maggie, and Senator Reeves, who'd accepted their invitation and arrived bearing impressive bourbon. Lily had created a seating chart with mathematical precision. Over roasted turkey and optimized sides, they told stories. Dave shared Kuwait memories, censored versions appropriate for 8-year-olds. Reeves added his perspective. Dylan contributed Amazon horror stories that made Sterling's dramas seem quaint. Maggie mostly listened, absorbing the miracle of family forming around her. Not the family she'd been born into, but the one she'd accidentally built through crisis and courage. When Lily announced pie time, Dylan helped her in the kitchen. Through the doorway, Maggie watched her son patiently explain web frameworks while Lily peppered him with questions. Dave leaned close. Your kid's pretty great. Our kids are pretty great. He smiled at the possessive R, recognizing the commitment it represented. Later, after guests had departed and Lily had fallen asleep mid-conversation, Maggie and Dave stood at the kitchen sink doing dishes. This was good. Yeah, it was. Dave, what you said at the waterfront about the 3rd bedroom, I've been thinking. He paused, dish towel suspended. And I want to be clear. When we move in together, not if, when I'm all in. No exit strategy, no keeping my apartment as backup. We do this for real or not at all. Dave set down the plate, turned to face her fully. Maggie Sterling, are you proposing we seriously commit to cohabitation with intent toward permanent partnership? I suppose I am. Then my answer is yes. Enthusiastically, terrifyingly yes. They sealed it with a kiss that tasted like pie and coffee and promises made by people old enough to understand their weight. 6 months passed in acceleration. Guardian moved from prototype to production-ready system. Defense contractors and pharmaceutical companies lined up for pilot programs. Dave's engineering team grew, populated by brilliant people the industry had discarded. Marcus's defamation suit dragged through discovery depositions endless motions. But without injunctive relief, it was background noise rather than existential threat. In May, Maggie and Dave moved into the Cambridge house. Dylan helped them pack, making terrible jokes about his mother playing house at 63. Lily claimed the room with the best natural light for her coding workspace. The first night in their new home, Dave found Maggie standing at the kitchen window, overlooking a small garden neither of them knew how to maintain. Second thoughts. Just thoughts. She turned to face him. I spent 40 years in that Beacon Hill apartment, chosen by a decorator to project success. Never felt like home. And this feels like possibility, like maybe I'm finally learning how to live instead of just achieve. He pulled her close. We're both learning. That's what makes it work. The Sterling Innovation Archive opened in June with ceremony that drew tech industry veterans, MIT professors, current Sterling employees. The exhibit told the company's messy truth, including Dave's contributions to Sentinel, the patent dispute with Victor Brennan, the near miss with Ventura Corp. At the ribbon cutting, Maggie gave brief remarks about her father's vision about invisible builders who made innovation possible, about second chances and redemption. Dave stood beside her, uncomfortable with public attention, but present because it mattered. Lily wore a dress she'd chosen herself and explained Guardian's cryptographic architecture to anyone who'd listen. Dylan flew in from Seattle with his new girlfriend, a data scientist who bonded with Lily over machine learning theory. Senator Reeves attended, bringing 3 Commerce Committee colleagues interested in Guardian's defense applications. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed and caterers cleaned up, Maggie found herself alone in the archive room, the actual basement space where Dave had found her with a bottle of pills 6 months ago. The room looked different now. Clean, well-lit, full of carefully curated artifacts. The hidden chamber was visible through plexiglass preserved as historical exhibit. Her father's IBM computer sat behind protective barriers. Dave appeared in the doorway, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "Figured I'd find you here." "Just remembering." She accepted the glass. "6 months ago I was sitting on that floor ready to die. Now I'm standing here celebrating. Lot can change in 6 months. Everything can change." She clinked her glass against his. "To always another chapter. To always another chapter." They drank, and Maggie thought about all the chapters still unwritten. Guardian's full deployment. Sterling's continued independence. Her relationship with Dylan deepening. The family she and Dave were building from spare parts and second chances. Real love at 62 wasn't about passion or fireworks. It was about finding someone who'd seen you at your absolute worst and chosen to stay anyway. Someone who made complicated feel manageable and impossible feel merely difficult. Dave was that someone. She was that someone for him, too. Outside Boston Harbor glittered in June sunshine, the city her father had bet everything on, where she'd failed and succeeded and failed again, and finally learned that success wasn't about never falling, it was about who helped you stand back up. "Ready to go home?" Dave asked. "Yeah, let's go home." They walked out together, leaving the archive to its careful preservation of the past, and stepped into the future they were building, one honest conversation, one shared challenge, one chosen commitment at a time. The Sterling security story wasn't finished. It never would be. That was the point. Companies didn't end with triumphant board votes or successful product launches. They evolved, adapted, struggled, survived. So did people. Maggie Sterling had spent 40 years running Sterling Security like a war campaign every quarter, a battle, every competitor, an enemy, every setback, a defeat. Now, at 63, she was finally learning a different approach, building instead of conquering, collaborating instead of dominating, trusting people instead of merely managing them. Dave Chen had spent 15 years invisible fixing elevators while his talent gathered dust. Now at 58 he was remembering who he'd been before the world decided he was obsolete. Brilliant engineer, patient teacher, guardian of Lily's remarkable mind. Together they were creating something neither could have built alone. Not just guardian, though that mattered. Not just Sterling's renewed independence, though that mattered too. They were proving that it's never too late to start showing up for the people who see you clearly. Never too late to choose honesty over image, substance over style, human connection over corporate hierarchy. Never too late for another chapter. The future was uncertain. Marcus might appeal forever. Competitors might steal Guardian's concepts. The market might shift. Sterling might struggle. But Maggie and Dave would face it together, with Lily's brilliance lighting the path and Dylan's support steadying their resolve, with Senator Reeves and Harold Jenkins and Patricia Okoye and the invisible workers who kept Sterling functioning, all of them writing the next chapter collaboratively, messily, honestly. That evening in the Cambridge house that was finally home, Dave cooked dinner while Lily debugged code and Maggie reviewed Guardian deployment schedules. Dylan video called from Seattle, updating them on his project launch. Ordinary, domestic, perfect. "Dinner's ready," Dave announced. They gathered around the table, Maggie, Dave, Lily, and Dylan's face on a laptop propped between the salt and pepper. They ate pasta Dave had made from scratch, drank wine that cost exactly what it should, and talked about everything and nothing. This was the victory. Not the board vote or the courtroom ruling or the Guardian success. This, family assembled from broken pieces. Purpose rediscovered. Love found in the most unlikely circumstances by people who'd stopped believing it was possible. "To always another chapter," Maggie said, raising her glass. "Always another chapter," they echoed. And somewhere in Boston, in a basement archive carefully preserved, the ghost of Robert. Sterling smiled. His daughter had finally learned what he'd tried to teach her. that the best innovations come from people who've been broken and rebuilt, who understand failure intimately enough to design systems that withstand it. That dignity isn't about titles or corner offices. It's about showing up, doing honest work, and going home knowing you didn't cut corners. That real builders don't need their names in lights. They just need to know what they built still stands. Always another chapter. Always.